Hi, this is Lee, this is Politics Girl, and today we are doing What is Going On with the Democratic Party. Okay, so for a long time, we watched the Republican Party set itself to self-destruct. They had dozens of political candidates, they wasted a lot of money, they had all that juvenile, look how big my hands are, infighting stuff, and they basically had this reality star that no one took seriously until it was far too late. But those days are over. Gone is the talk of a contested convention. The white knight candidate, even the self-imposed Never Trump movement seems to have lost all steam. Major Republicans are doing complete 180s to embrace a candidate that they once considered an insane joke. The Democrats, on the other hand, seem to be flailing out of control. Hillary Clinton is either a powerful, presumptive nominee or a completely unlikable danger, depending on who you're talking to. Bernie Sanders is the messiah of the progressive movement or an old curmudgeon who refuses to admit defeat. There's call for the head of the DNC, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, to resign over unfair treatment of her candidates and just a general level of incompetence. And then there's even talk of their own white knight candidate, with someone like Joe Biden coming in at the 11th hour to save the party if Clinton is indicted for her emails. It's a mess. And the Democrats don't have the luxury of being a hot mess right now. This isn't the year to fracture the party. As I've said before, presidential elections are not just about electing a president. They're about the Supreme Court and the down-ballot elections that can switch the balance of Congress. This particular year has at least 2 Supreme Court justices who need replacing and a Senate that can potentially be swung back to the left. So it's a bad time for Democrats to be fighting with Democrats. Even with great love and belief for what Sanders stands for, the facts are, realistically, his numbers are not adding up. Yes, he could win California. He probably will. But he'd have to win by such a ludicrously high percentage to really shift Clinton's momentum at this point. No matter what your thoughts are on the inclusion of superdelegates within the Democratic primary, even without them, at least 3 million more voters have already chosen Clinton over Sanders. The primary system is flawed, but it can be beaten. Barack Obama did it 8 years ago when the superdelegates who were already pledged to Clinton switched their allegiance to him. And Donald Trump did it this year, even with the entire Republican machine working against it. You can have enthusiastic voters and huge rallies and excited volunteers, but our government just isn't set up for a revolution. It has too many checks, too many balances, too many fingers in the pie. Even if you could put President Bernie Sanders in office today, he would still have to deal with a Republican-controlled Congress and a majority of Republican governors and state legislatures, all who would be completely against what he stands for. The president might be the most important job in the land, but it's just one part of the machine. A revolution takes more than one person in one office. Real change can only happen if you have a lot of down-ticket candidates who agree with your presidential platform. Senators, congressmen, state legislators, governors. And that takes time, and it takes organization. Bernie Sanders has only been a Democrat for just over a year. And despite his consistent and morally centered work in the Senate, he doesn't have the connections or maybe even the desire to make inroads with other Democrats at this time. The Clinton campaign, however, has already started diverting funds and resources towards electing down-ticket Democratic candidates in the hopes of increasing the likelihood of getting the legislation she wants passed if she is elected. It's big picture thinking and the nitty-gritty of how things get done in politics. And say what you will about her, she understands how this system works. Sanders has mass grassroots momentum, but he's only currently using it for the presidency, which, as we've seen over the past 8 years, can be kind of an impotent position if you don't have Congress supporting what you stand for. Whether you believe in what Bernie stands for or not, Sanders has run an incredibly inspired campaign. He's pulled his competitor more to the left, opened up ideas previously left unconsidered, and he's fired up this group of typically disinterested and apathetic voters. The entire thing should be looked at as a great progressive success. Fighting to the end? Absolutely. Continuing to push for change and transparency? Definitely. But burning down the house you're standing in? It's probably a mistake. At the end of the day, the cornerstone to democracy is compromise. It's far from a perfect system, but it's infinitely preferable to the alternatives. And the more we rail against the system, the more extremist our rhetoric, the more we insist that any sort of compromise is failure, the more broken the system becomes. You only have to look at our current Congress to see that failure in action. So, shutting down the government, Bernie or bust, They're basically two sides of the same coin. It's just refusing to play, taking your toys and going home if you don't get exactly what you want. And it's short-sighted. If anything, the Democrats, especially Bernie supporters, should see the Supreme Court as their best chance at a progressive revolution. Filling those 2, if not 3 seats during the next presidency with left-leaning justices that will pull the court towards more progressive and liberal rulings will make far more of a difference than any president ever could. A Democrat or a progressive who's willing to allow Trump to become president, it just makes no sense. Clinton may not be your first choice, but she won't put a climate change denier or someone pro-life on the Supreme Court. And those justices, those ones that are put there, they're going to be there for 30 years. 30 years! Trump is hated by most of his party, but they're willing to get behind him because they understand what's at stake. The Democrats need to see that same writing on the wall, and they need to embrace their candidate, whomever it is. Otherwise, it's going to be a heck of a wake-up call come November. So, if you live in California, don't forget to vote in your primary this Tuesday. And other than that, get out there, keep in mind, watch what happens at that convention, and don't forget to stay in the know. Politics Girl!